Wimmer's Sewing and Vacuum 99th Anniversary Sale. Every vacuum and every sewing machine is on sale. Take bigger discounts off a floor model. A quality vacuum from Wimmer's should last you 10 to 15 years. It will clean your carpets better and make them last longer. The 99th Anniversary Sale at your locally owned and operated Wimmer's Sewing and Vacuum. Open Tuesday to Saturday at 745 North Main.
It's time for the Garden Guide with your host, Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden.
New research suggests that people are more likely to eat vegetables if they have a tempting name.
What would life be without homegrown tomatoes? Only two things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes.
From gardening to landscaping.
Today we are going to try and create garden eyebrows. Kind of like the flowers are sprouting directly from your hair. That makes sense.
Phone lines are open at 753-KVNU or 800-369-KVNU.
Kind of like eating vegetables.
It's the Garden Guide, now on KVNU 610 AM and 102 FM.
And we welcome you to the Garden Guide on this Saturday morning, as it's kind of the tail end of fall break for most of the schools. And even Utah State getting a day off for fall break. And definitely, as we have Mark Anderson joining us in the studio, fall is definitely here now with the cold temperatures we've had this week.
And, a little snow in October is not all that unusual. So, we'll take the moisture and, it's kind of nice to watch the leaves fall off the trees and kind of know that, this is the end of the season and it's time to start cleaning up, and we can start moving some of those leaves into the garden to kind of prep for next year. So, it's a great time of year to be outside. And, we've had some cold temperatures, but, there's going to be some nice warm days coming up still. We can really get a lot of things done out in the yard still.
My youngest, who's still trick-or-treating, she said she's okay with snow right now if it means that it's still going to be warmer weather at the end of the month, because we've had snow then too.
Oh, yeah.
So,
on Halloween, it gets kind of chilly, but, it's not unusual to have 70-degree temperatures for Halloween either. So we kind of get a little bit of everything. But, it's just kind of nice to wrap up the garden and feel like, you've harvested everything and, got everything put away. And tomatoes are done now, so you don't have to worry about those anymore. So
I had a friend of mine, I was talking to him. He spent the week, he planted 20 or 25 tomato plants this year. And I said, how's that going for you? And he said, I have been bottling tomatoes for 2 weeks straight.
Yep.
I said, well, you brought that on yourself.
I can believe it. We had about 30 plants ourselves this year.
Ooh.
And, when you're picking, bushel and a half, 2 bushels every week, that's a lot of tomatoes coming on. So, but it's been good. It's been great. We've been able to share harvest with a lot of people, and our pumpkins have been amazing. So we've got those out on the porch and just enjoying fall. It's time to get the garden ready to till and get it ready for next year. I want to till a whole section just so I can plant some garlic and have that ready for next year as well too. So I'm planning on doing a good sized row of garlic because we've been just enjoying it all fall.
And you mentioned that you've had garlic in the store now, and a number of different varieties if people want to come in and check it out.
Yeah, so this year we had about 20 varieties. I think we're down to about 15 now. We've sold out of a few, but we've got hardneck and softneck varieties, and some organic varieties as well too. So they're fully certified organic. But for hardneck varieties, some of my favorites. Let's see: German Red, Spanish Roja, Music. We've done some cooking with a new one this year that I've never done before. It's called Purple Glazer. That has been really, really good. We've really enjoyed that. And then I've had a lot of customers coming back for some of my newer varieties this year. Susanville and Rosa di Sulmona. They are both softneck varieties, so they keep really, really well. So they're like 8-month long keepers. So they'll keep store really, really well, even until, next summer when you're harvesting your next garlic. They'll keep for that long. So I've got some really great varieties, and I'm looking forward to planting a bunch out in our garden this fall.
And you mentioned the garlic, for some, I've never tried garlic. Pretty easy.
Oh, very easy. So you take the big heads and you break them apart so you have individual cloves. Yeah, and then what I would do is take a hoe or a cultivator of some sort and just kind of make about a 3 to 4 inch deep trench, and then a good slow release fertilizer down the bottom. Bone meal would be really good. Any type of bulb food like the Dutch bulb food would be excellent. Just sprinkle that right down in the bottom of your trench. You're going to place your cloves in probably about every 4 to 6 inches apart, and our trench is about 3 inches deep. So one bulb about every 6 inches is perfect. And then cover those up and then water them really well. So that's the key with whether it's garlic or whether it's tulips or daffodils that we're planting. Even though there's good soil moisture right now after all these storms that we've had, you want to make sure that you retain that moisture in the soil until the ground freezes, which is probably going to be about a month from now. It's usually about mid-November when the ground really freezes, and it just depends on what the weather does for the next month or so. But when the ground freezes, we want to make sure there's good soil moisture there so that moisture is available to the plants throughout the entire fall and winter. And if the soil is really dry when the ground freezes, then it's going to pretty much stay dry for the rest of the winter, and they're going to struggle. They're not going to do very well. So this year we saw garlic bulbs were a little smaller. They didn't multiply, didn't produce quite as much as they normally do because we had such a dry fall and winter. They didn't multiply. They just didn't produce as well as they ought to. So that fertilizer down the bottom is critical, and then water afterwards.
Water really good.
Water them up good.
Mm-hmm. And we got to talk about bulbs too, because that's on everybody's mind. I have to joke. My wife and I we pulled the bulbs a year and a half ago, stored them up, dried them up, put them down in our basement cellar, and all of a sudden last summer we started looking. And where's all our bulbs at? They're still down in the cellar. We totally forgot. And so this year she said, I'm going to make sure. So she set a Google alert. so she wouldn't forget because it's just one of those things. You just all of a sudden realize that you just don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And so, but now is the time to plant.
And that's really a good way to rejuvenate your bulbs is, after they're done blooming in, say, late April or May, then dig those up, leave the tops on them, put them in a box, put them in a bushel basket, put them down the basement where it's cool and dry. Just leave the tops on there, and as the tops dry up, they'll feed the bulbs with all that strength. It'll go right back into the bulb, and so you can pull those out in the fall. Usually, about mid-October is like the best time for planting. So we're like prime time for planting right now. Pull those out, break the tops off. The bulbs are just perfect, ready to be planted again. So it's a really good way to rejuvenate your flower beds and rejuvenate those bulbs a little bit so that you can fertilize them. You can add some organic matter to the soil. You can really rejuvenate that soil and get them going again without having to spend a lot of money and buy a whole lot of bulbs just to replace them all completely. They do have a little bit of a lifespan, and so during that lifespan, 5 to 7 years for the tulips usually. But if you can rejuvenate them a couple times during that lifespan, that seems to work really well.
Yeah, and they're so easy to be able to start. There are several that we've had for several years, and then we were able to cycle through to new ones. Yeah. And just with a little water, even in some of the more, depending upon which side your home faces, some of those areas that it's just really a struggle to get other things to grow.
Yeah.
And the bulbs, you can get bulbs.
The bulbs are great because, even if they're in kind of a shadier location, the leaves aren't on the trees when they're coming up, and so they'll do well in a shady spot because there's full sun because the trees don't have leaves on them yet. And so that works great. But, for right now, we've got tulips, we've got daffodils, hyacinths, we've got crocus, and a bunch of other, unique and different bulbs, like allium and crown imperials, fritillaria. They are so easy. That's the great thing about bulbs. They're so easy to plant. Basically, figure out which location you're going to put them in, dig your holes, put the fertilizer down the bottom, drop your bulbs in there, cover them up, water them, and that's it. Mother Nature pretty much takes care of the rest. You really don't have to do hardly anything to them in the springtime. They'll just come up on their own. Got to watch out for deer, obviously, because they love to eat the tulips, but they won't touch the daffodils. So if you have deer problems, you can always plant lots of daffodils, and the deer just won't touch them at all.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
There's just some of those things. We had deer taking out big chunks out of our pumpkins this year.
Oh, yeah,
something
yeah.
that we've never had.
Yeah, they'll get in there and they'll just like eat one little section of it and then leave it, and it's just pretty much ruined the whole pumpkin or squash or tomatoes. They never seem to eat the whole thing. They just take a bite or two out of it and then move on to the next thing. So they're traditional browsers. They just like to nibble a little bit on everything. So
it's like somebody walking through a buffet line, at the restaurant. And, I'll just have a little bit of this, and then they move on.
Exactly. So crocus are early bloomers, and so if you want something that's going to bloom, fairly early, then crocus are great because they're coming up almost as soon as the snow melts. So they're blooming the end of March, and just fun to watch that color pop up. And if you throw some pansies out there, you've got some pansies, and then you've got crocus, and then the daffodils are coming up right behind those. And hyacinths are kind of about mid-April, towards the latter part of April, and then a lot of tulips will bloom about mid-April through the end of May, even to like Memorial Day, depending on which variety you get. So there's early, like single early tulips. There are Fosteriana tulips, which would be all your emperor tulips. You've got your mid-season tulips will be like Triumph and Darwin hybrids, and then your late tulips are going to be like your single late, your cottage type tulips. And if you plan things out properly and have a wide variety of different bulbs that you're planting, you can have color out in your yard for over 2 months, because once they start to bloom, they'll bloom for generally about 2 weeks, and the flowers kind of fade out. But if you're planning on having some earlies, some mid-seasons, and then some late flowers going on, you can have a consistent show of flowers in your yard by just planning your bulbs out properly.
And really inexpensive, because you can use them for several years, which I love.
Yeah, and the daffodils, they naturalize really well. So the bulbs of the daffodils just tend to split and divide year after year, and they don't decline as quickly as the tulips do. So, where tulips are only going to last, maybe 7 years, and then it's time to replace them, daffodils just kind of keep going and going and going.
And you end up getting even more of them. And
yeah. As they divide, you just get more. And so the daffodils are great to plant. One, because the deer won't eat them. Two, because they just multiply. And three, they're just about as easy as anything there is to grow. So if you feel like you don't have a green thumb and gardening is not your cup of tea, daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, they're just as easy as it gets. And basically you just have to go through that process that I just mentioned. Dig your hole, little fertilizer, put your bulbs in, cover them up, water them, and that's it. They just take care of all the rest.
Yeah. We're talking with Mark Anderson for the Garden Guide here on KVNU. We aren't taking calls today. We're taking questions that have come into the store over the past week, and we got a number of things we want to talk about. But speaking of the store, Mark, a lot of fall decor is on sale right now over at the store.
Yeah. And we're decorating the store up for the holidays, and we're working like crazy every day to try and make things work. And, we're having the same issues that everybody else is with product arriving and being really late this year, despite having purchased all this material almost a year ago. We plan ahead. We're always working almost a year in advance on everything. But even despite ordering early, all of our stuff's showing up late just because of the shipping issues, and containers. And so we're working really hard, but we've got a great selection of fall decor right now. So if you want to decorate for fall, if you want to decorate for Thanksgiving, we've got just some wonderful pieces. We've got wreaths, we've got tabletop, we've got all kinds of great things that just make your home feel warm and cozy with oranges and yellows and reds and browns, just all those great natural colors that we're seeing right now. And all of our fall decor is 15% off right now, so we've got a little discount going on for the next couple of weeks on all of fall decor. And you just got to come in and see what we've got. And while you're looking at the fall decor, you'll probably get attracted to some of the Christmas stuff that we have as well too.
It's already going up.
Already working on it.
There a couple of weeks ago.
It takes months for us to decorate, and so when we do the store, we plan on doing about 22 to 25 fully decorated themed Christmas trees. So we're currently putting up wreaths and garlands right now. We've got a whole bunch of trees that are set up, and we've probably got about we probably have about 12 trees, maybe 13 or 14 that are decorated already. So we've got more to go, but we've already got a bunch of our trees decorated, and they look amazing. They look great. All of our Christmas lights are here, so thank goodness we got our Christmas lights. So we're ready to go for Christmas lights. And our new LED lights, they just look amazing. We've been able to install those on a lot of different trees, and all of our customers can't even tell that they're LEDs. They just look so good. They're warm, they're soft, and they have the right color, and you just don't have to worry about replacing bulbs or fixing anything. It just takes all the hassle out of the Christmas lights, and they're using about 1/10 of the electricity as well too. So it's a great time to come in the store, see what we're decorating, and hopefully get a great deal on some fall decor right now at 15% off. So
we converted over to the LED Christmas lights this past year.
Yeah,
love them.
Yeah,
they're just
so nice. So we've got a lot of people that are actually bringing in their Christmas trees that they've had for 5, 8, 10 years, some even longer. And the trees still look really good, but their lights are all wearing out, and so now with the new LED lights, we can show them and do a little comparison and say, here's what your incandescent lights look like, and here's our new LEDs. And they look at them, they go, oh wow, it's like they look so good. I mean, they look so close to the incandescent lights, but when it comes down to it, you'll be able to run those for 10 years, maybe even longer, 15 years, and never have to replace a single bulb on them. And you can't beat that. The wiring is smaller. The plugs, I mean, we can do 200 lights. We can actually do 600 lights on just one strand, all linked together. And so it makes it much, much easier to light a Christmas tree. Basically have a plug for each section of your Christmas tree. And then we've got an extension cord that will run up through the middle of your tree, and you just plug those lights into each section of the extension cord and light your whole tree up. It's got an on-off switch on it. It just makes it like super easy to set your tree up. So we can show you how that works. We've got some gorgeous trees in stock right now. We have our fingers crossed that our big shipment of trees will be here in the next couple of weeks, but right now we're just holding our breath till they get here, because we've got so many gorgeous trees coming, flocked, frosted, just green, so many different kinds, but they're not here yet.
Just probably sitting on a container ship off the coast of California, like everything else.
So we got our fingers crossed they'll be here by the 1st of November, but we're not holding our breath, we'll put it that way. So
we're talking with Mark Anderson for the Garden Guide, and we have more questions that have come into the store. But also, you mentioned the cash sale is going to continue on this weekend.
That's right. So we're still clearing out trees and shrubs and evergreens. We're getting down to the last little bit. There's only a handful of trees left. We've got some gorgeous shrubs still. I just saw a couple go out the door yesterday that looked amazing, and I was like, why do we still have these? They look so good. You could definitely get them home and get them planted. So even with the cold weather, the ground's not frozen. We get some sun that comes out, dries things out a little bit. It'll be perfect conditions for planting shrubs, planting evergreens, planting trees. You can get them established long before winter sets in. Yeah. We've planted trees and shrubs as late as even the first week of December, and they've just done amazingly well the next year. So there's some really good-looking, nice deciduous shrubs, some flowering shrubs, and a few evergreens, and just like I said, a handful of flowering trees and some shade trees left. But if you come in, we're doing 75% off if you pay with cash, and it is 60% off if you pay with a debit card or a credit card. So you can still get that extra discount if you come in and pay with cash. But otherwise, if you want to use your credit card, you're still getting 60% off. It's a great deal to find a new home for some shrubs and some trees.
Great time to be able to take advantage of those sale prices. 60 to 75% off, the cash sale continuing on. So you mentioned earlier that pretty much everything is got to be winterized at this point. Yeah. Whether it's your garden, flower beds, definitely you want to start winterizing. Start to winterize your lawn if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Start lowering that lawnmower blade. Yeah. That'll help there. Let's maybe start with the flower gardens. Roses. What can you do to start prepping them for the colder months?
So roses have looked great this fall. With the weather that we've had, they've just kind of produced, and now they're starting to really get get ready for winter. And so what we do with our roses first is don't prune them. Let the flowers that have formed this fall just fade naturally. They will produce rose hips, and it will actually speed up the winterization process of the roses. If we do some pruning, it's actually going to encourage a little bit of growth, and it will slow down that winterization process that's happening naturally in the roses, and it'll encourage some growth. We don't want to do that. So no pruning this fall. If we decide they're too tall and you need to do a little bit of pruning, wait and do it as late as possible. Around Thanksgiving, around the first part of December, even after you've mulched them and winterized them and got everything ready, prune them really, really late so it doesn't encourage any new growth, and that should work out. That should work out great. So what we're doing right now is using a 1/4 cup of magnesium sulfate. So the magnesium sulfate, those two components really are beneficial to the roses. So the sulfur helps lower the pH and frees up other nutrients. So by applying sulfur, it'll decrease the pH, and iron will become more available, and a lot of other nutrients will become more available to the plants. And the roses just do better in a little bit more acidic soil than what we have. So the sulfur that's in the mag sulfate really helps a bunch. The magnesium is a natural but a flower encourager, so it'll actually make them bloom more. And so by using a 1/4 cup of the magnesium sulfate, lowers the pH, frees up other nutrient, makes them get ready to bloom like crazy for next year. And then we use a 1/4 cup of potash on them too. And the potash, that particular nutrient is really good for helping the roses pick up water, pick up nutrient, store that nutrient, and it really helps them prepare for next year and makes them hardier through the wintertime. So by doing that little cocktail of magnesium sulfate and potash, 1/4 cup of each around each rose, water it in really well, that's going to make them probably about 10 degrees hardier than they would be otherwise, and then make them bloom next year, lower the pH of the soil. It's just got so many good benefits to putting that on your roses in the fall. Then mulch them. And so we're going to mulch them with, I like to use a good soil building conditioner, a good mulch that at the first part of next year when the snow's gone, I can pull that mulch away from the roses and just kind of work it into the soil. If you want to use like leaves or grass clippings, that works great to protect the roses and insulate them through the wintertime, but then you have to clean it up in the spring, which is just not as much fun.
Yeah. If you can return it right to the soil.
Yeah. It's a lot more work. It's great to have the free material when I'll just run the lawnmower over the lawn, pick up the leaves, mulch those all up with the grass clippings at the same time. And that works great to protect the roses with. But then you have to clean it up in the springtime. If you use a good compost, some sort of poultry manure works better than steer manure. So I like to use the soil building conditioner. Comes in 3 cubic foot compressed bales. Usually do about 4 to 6 roses with one of those bales, and it works awesome. Then I just work it back into the soil in the springtime when I pull it away from the roses, and that works great. So magnesium sulfate and potash, put that on the ground around the roses, water them really well, put your mulch on, your conditioner. Usually we're going to put probably 10 to 12, maybe even 14 inches deep around the bases of the roses to try and protect those grafts where all the gorgeous, beautiful, decorative roses come from. And then during the wintertime, we want to put more snow on top of that as well too. So I'll even run the snowblower down past the roses and just throw snow on top.
Right on top.
Yeah, right on top of the mulch, because that will even insulate them better. And so if you get a good 12 inches of mulch in there, that's going to protect those grafts. And then we put 2 feet of snow on top of that. That's going to really insulate and protect your roses through the wintertime. They'll come through the winter better. You won't have as much dieback. You won't have to prune as much next spring. I mean, we're going to prune them down to 12 inches, 10 or 12 inches anyway, but you get those protected properly. You can prune into 10 or 12 inches, and all the canes will be green and lush and beautiful and ready to go. So that's really our best technique for winterizing the roses is use the mag sulfate and potash. Make sure they get watered really well before you mulch them up. Mulch them 12 to 14 inches deep, 2 feet of snow on top of them, or even more if we get plenty of snow. And then hope that we don't have those big transitions throughout the wintertime where we go into sub-zero temperatures, and then 3 weeks later we're in the 50s, and then it goes back really cold again. That's when it really does a lot of damage to roses and other flowering shrubs that might be a little bit marginal for our area. So, not only can you do roses, but you can do the same thing to your hydrangeas. It's great for hydrangeas. It's great for azaleas and rhododendrons. Any type of flowering shrubs that you've got that might be struggling, might have a hard time overwintering, and might have some winter damage that shows up on those. That's a great way to prepare those and help them for next year. Really get them ready to handle the cold weather of winter.
So the magnesium sulfate.
Yep.
Definitely want to work that into it first. And then basically you're almost going to build just a small little igloo around those roses.
And it
helps to insulate.
There's a device that's called a rose collar, which is kind of a plastic collar that you can put in around the roses. It's usually about 10 inches tall, and they snap together, and just makes this perfect little ring around the roses. It's great for putting the mulch inside, and it just holds it there so it doesn't kind of slough off and break away through the wintertime. So magnesium sulfate, quarter cup of potash, sprinkle that on the ground around the roses, water them really well, put your mulch on, snow on top of that. If you need to, do a little bit of pruning in late November or early December, just to make sure, like, say your rose canes don't get broken from snow sliding off the roof, or there's a couple reasons that would be very appropriate for pruning a little bit more aggressively. But don't prune them down past 3 feet. 3 feet's usually a good size to kind of clean them up to, because in the spring we're going to prune another 2 feet off of them. We're going to cut them down to about 12 inches. Yeah, we gotta really prune the roses aggressively in the spring to encourage new growth, because all the flowers come on brand new growth. They won't come on that old growth. So we get rid of the old growth, encourage new growth with lots of fertilizer, good preparation practices through the wintertime, and then they'll bloom like crazy for you next year.
Okay. And speaking of, we got to talk more about pruning coming up. We've hit the bottom of the hour. And coming up, we'll talk about garden prep, also how to take care of your lawn, get that ready as well. It's the KVNU Garden Guide with Mark Anderson of Anderson Seed and Garden, with more coming up next.
In for Will Philwright, I'm Bill Walter, KVNU News. A Cache County man between the ages of 45 and 64 years of age became the 143rd resident of northern Utah to die of COVID-19, one of 17 deaths reported since Thursday by the Utah Department of Health. The state's death toll grew to 3,067 since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. With 1,493 new COVID-positive cases in the state's Friday report, there have now been overall 529,147 cases since the pandemic began. The Department of Health said that 109 of the new total cases Friday were found in northern Utah. In northern Utah, over the course of the pandemic, there have been 29,052 cases, and more than 27,000 COVID patients are considered recovered. Hospitalizations reported Friday amount to 559 Utahns, which is 14 fewer than on Thursday. Among those currently hospitalized, 209 are in intensive care, 4 fewer than on Thursday. Logan City has added an additional green waste debris disposal site in response to the overwhelming amount of tree debris created by the storm last Tuesday. The public is welcome to use the Willow Park Sports Complex, 450 West, 700 South, in the parking lot west end by the railroad tracks for tree limb debris disposal. No other green waste or trash will be accepted. Over the weekend, pretty nice weather, sunny days, clear at night, lows in the mid to upper 20s, high temperatures around 60 into the lower 60s by Sunday. For the latest news, visit CacheValleyDaily.com.
From ABC Sports. Hi, everybody. I'm Todd Ant. He may become one of the most coveted free agents this winter, but Astros shortstop Carlos Correa still has some unfinished business to tend to on the field, and he got busy in Game 1 of the AL Championship Series.
2-2 to Correa. Bust it! Left field! Para La Calle! 4-3!
The call on KBME, Correa's seventh-inning home run broke a 3-all tie and put Houston ahead for good. Jose Altuve added a homer and drove in 3 runs, and the Astros outlasted the Red Sox 5-4 to take a 1-0 series lead in the ALCS in Houston. While watching his home run ball, Correa pointed to his wrist and yelled, "It's my time."
When the playoffs start, they always tell me, it's your time now to go out there, hit homers, this and that. So, they told me to hit the watch. And when I hit the homer.
Game 2 this afternoon in Houston. This is ABC.
Not sure what to give for a holiday gift? How about a gift card to the new and improved Beehive Pub and Grill? Receive a free gelato with a $25 gift card purchase, or a free burger or sandwich of your choice with a $50 gift card purchase. Dustin McKay, owner and chef, is always improving upon an outstanding menu. Open 11 to 9 weekdays and 11 to 10 Friday and Saturday. Beehive Pub and Grill is perfect for the holidays.
Ho, 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 ho. Work waits for no one. No excuses, no compromise. That's why you drive a diesel. Whether it's on the farm, construction site, or a weekend romp in the mountains. And if there's one place that understands that, it's Moonlight Diesel. Keeping up on maintenance keeps your diesel truck on task. From regular maintenance to complex repairs, Moonlight Diesel is the Valley's diesel engine experts. From pickup trucks to dump trucks, there's always more work to be done, and that's why there's Moonlight Diesel.
Moonlight Diesel, fix it right in Moonlight. Moonlight Diesel.
Hey, get prepared for the hunting season. Did you remember to bring your hunting gear, your sleeping bags, and coats into Mount Logan Laundry? With their 55 and 80-pound washers and dryers, they can do any job. And while you're at it, bring in the comforters and blankets and get ready for the colder months ahead. Try Mount Logan Laundry. For a few quarters, you can use their large-capacity washers and dryers and be done in no time. Free Wi-Fi and drop-off service. They're at the corner of 5th East and 9th North in Logan, or in Brigham on the corner of 1st East and 7th South. Mount Logan Laundry really is the cleanest spot in town.
From gardening to landscaping, The Garden Guide with Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Welcome back. It is The Garden Guide with Mark Anderson of Anderson Seed and Garden. We were talking before we hit the break about preparing your rose beds for winter, but this also kind of leads us into gardening, just overall prep and pruning.
Yeah.
How to get your gardens and lawns ready for winter.
A lot of people coming in right now, and after we've had all this cold weather, like, okay, my perennials are done. What do I need to do? Oh, my cannas are died all the way down, cold weather. How do I get those to come back again next year? So cleaning up the perennial beds and the annual flowers. Annual flowers, I'll just yank those out. They go in the compost pile. They're done.
Finished.
They're finished for this year, unless you want to try and get them to reseed a little bit. So sometimes we'll take our cosmos or marigolds, and you can kind of
shake them.
Yeah, shake them and kind of sprinkle the seeds around. That works just fine if you want kind of a haphazard flower garden for next year. But with the perennials, all that growth from this year, it's going to die back. And if you don't clean it up in the fall, you're going to have to clean it in the spring. And if you clean it in the spring, it makes a bigger mess, and it's harder to deal with than it is right now. And so a little bit of time and a little bit of effort put into cleaning those up this fall, and you're going to have a nice clean garden to have to work with next spring instead of a messy, mucky, dirty, awful, yucky, whatever's left over.
Yeah, muddy mess for the spring.
Exactly. So I like to get out there, and sometimes even take the weed trimmer that I use to trim the grass with, and just go out there and just zoom, zoom, and just cut everything down, whether that's the hostas or whether that's the black-eyed Susans or the cosmos, or not the cosmos, the coreopsis. We've got a lot of different perennials blooming in our yard, and we'll just trim those all right down to the ground, maybe leave an inch or two of stems left on there. Everything else gets trimmed down, goes in the compost pile or the green waste recycler, whatever works for you. Just get rid of all those. And you can do a little bit of fertilizing this fall if you want to put a little slow release fertilizer out there. If you've got some plants that are a little more tender, just not quite as hardy through the wintertime, like say your tropical hibiscus, they need a little bit of extra mulch. So this would be a good time to mulch up some of those perennials that are a little marginal, just really not as hardy as some of the other ones. Great time to mulch those up. But then you've got dahlias and gladiolas and begonias and cannas and callas and caladiums that are wonderful bulbs that just produce beautiful foliage and flowers all summer long, but they won't winter over. And so we've got to dig those up, we got to dig those up and bring them inside. So if you've been down Center Street this year, there's been some beautiful zinnias, there's been petunias and salvias. A lot of those annual flowers we'll just yank out, but there's cannas in there as well too. The cannas were the really big, tall, large leaves, kind of spiky flowers that were right in the middle of the planters. Those will not winter over, so we're going to have to pull those out completely. And what we'll do is we'll trim the tops off, so there's about 2 or 3 inches of stem left on the tops of those. And this is the same thing we're going to do with like our dahlias and also our gladiolas, and trim those down so there's a little bit of stem left on there. Dig those bulbs up and just put them in a cardboard box with maybe a little bit of peat moss or wood shavings or vermiculite down in the bottom, and then just lay those bulbs in there. Shake all the excess dirt off, but just lay those bulbs in there and then cover them with the same material, wood shavings or vermiculite or peat moss, and then you can do another layer of bulbs on top of those, just so you have that insulating and the great thing about the peat moss or the wood shavings or the vermiculite is they'll pull a little bit of moisture away from the bulbs so they don't get too wet and rot, but it also retains a little bit of moisture so the bulbs stay slightly
completely dry out.
Yeah, they don't dry out. So there's just like a little bit of slight moisture there that they can pull back in if they start to dry out through the wintertime. And so it just works perfect. But we'll do multiple layers in the same box, and that works great. Just in like I said, a cardboard box or a crate, or you can put them in plastic totes or something, but sometimes that holds a little too much moisture if they're still wet, and just put them down the basement and the cellar where it's going to be between 40 and 50 degrees all winter would be just perfect conditions for those. And then generally around first part of April, we'll start pulling the cannas and the dahlias out and check those. You can kind of see where they're starting to sprout. If they're starting to sprout, you can see right where you can cut them, and you can actually divide those. So if you planted, one canna bulb this year, you're going to dig up like 6 or 7, and they multiply like crazy. Yeah, and so then if you can divide those properly, you can have 7 plants next year where you just had 1 the year before. They multiply that much, and the dahlias will do the same thing too. They multiply like crazy. So you wait for them to sprout just a little bit. You can see where the little sprouts are coming up off the bulbs, and we call them eyes. And you can just cut them so that there's a couple eyes on each piece, and divide those, and then all of a sudden you've got 5 times more than what you had last year, and that works great. Just got to have that cool, dry spot to store them in. Container, vermiculite, peat moss, perlite, and a little bit of time to get out there and dig those suckers up, and shake the excess dirt off, and store them for the winter, and away you go for the next year.
That's all you need.
Yeah, it works out great.
We're talking with Mark Anderson here for the Garden Guide. Again, we're not taking calls this time, just answering questions that have come into the store over the last couple of weeks. And definitely, I'm sure one of the questions that everybody's asking is, okay, what do I do to prepare my garden? And we've talked about this a few times, that there's a couple of key things that you can do to really help rejuvenate your soil for next year.
Yeah. So your garden did pretty well this year, didn't it?
Did really well.
Had good production. So to really encourage your garden to come back again next year, we're going to add some stuff back into it, because every time you go into the garden, you take a little bit out with you on your shoes, or whenever the water gets loose and you have a little bit of erosion, you're always losing soil from one
dig
year
up
to
your
the next.
potatoes.
You take the dirt with you, and nobody washes their potatoes off out in the garden. Usually you throw them on the lawn, and so at least you're putting the soil somewhere else. But every year you're going to lose a little bit of soil to erosion, and whatever reason that might be, whether it's wind or you took the potatoes inside and washed them in the sink, you're going to lose a little bit of soil every year. So you got to add some back in. And every year you grow a lot of plants, they're pulling nutrient out of the soil. So if you want to continue to get good production, we've got to add stuff back into the garden. And organic matter is great to loosen up the soil. It's great to condition clay soils. We've taken a really heavy clay garden, and over a 5 to 7 year period, just adding good organic matter to the garden, adding zeolite, adding a lot of different amendments, we've turned it from a really poor garden into an amazing garden just because of what we kept adding into there each year. It just get better and better and better every year. And so if you don't do that, you'll gradually deplete your soil, and it will get worse and worse and worse if you're not adding anything back into the garden. So this is the perfect time to put some organic matter, some nutrient, some minerals, some micronutrients back into the soil to help build it up and have it ready to go for next year. So do you have a neighbor that has like lots of dairy cows or
Well, we actually have a pasture right behind us, and so there's been a few times where we're just, hey, we'll just grab some of that manure right there.
Yeah. Well,
you
manure,
got to be careful though with manure.
You do. Manure is a great thing to add to your garden. You don't want to put too much.
Yes.
So the key word, and this is the key word that I teach everybody, the key word when you're adding organic matter to your garden is variety. You want a variety of different materials. If you use a lot of one thing, you're asking for trouble, because everything has some benefits and some side effects, and some of those side effects are not good. And if you get too much of any one material in there, it can cause a lot of problems. So if you put 4 inches of steer compost out there, it's going to probably burn your plants next year because of the high salt content, because of the high urea that's in there. But if you put an inch of steer manure out there, and then we balance that out with a variety of other materials like some wood shavings or sawdust, we can do straw, we can do leaves, we can do dry grass clippings. I mean, there's so many different materials you can add to your garden. The compost from the landfill is like almost straight wood-based material. So they'll take branches and limbs and they'll shred it up and they'll mix it in with the grass clippings and they'll start that decomposition process. But it's still really high in carbon. So all your manures and all of your really green wet waste is high in nitrogen. All the brown dry stuff is high in carbon. Yeah, it's high in carbon, and that's a gross generalization. That's not perfect, but it's pretty accurate. If it's brown and dry, unless it's a manure, it's going to be high in carbon, and if it's green and wet, it's going to be high in nitrogen. We want a 4-to-1 ratio carbon to nitrogen, so you want 4 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, and if you can do that carbon with a bunch of different materials, nothing will be so detrimental to your soil that it's going to stand out, but the mixture of all of those materials is going to be highly beneficial for the garden. If you put 4 inches of the compost from the landfill out there, it's so high in carbon, it pulls all the nitrogen out of your soil to decompose through the wintertime, and nothing will grow the next year because it's been depleted. Same thing, 4 inches of steer manure, too much nitrogen, doesn't break down, smells like manure the next spring. You're walking through it. You're laughing because you know what that's like. And it causes problems because you've got the salt content that comes in the manure, you've got the high urea, the high nitrogen ends up burning your plants, and so too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So we want to make sure and balance that out with a variety of different materials. And you have a lot of options. There's peat moss, there's zeolite, there is, coconut coir is amazing if you want to buy the product, soil pep, any type of poultry manure would be really good. Normally I tell people to kind of avoid a lot of steer manure because it can bring a lot of diseases into the garden.
And oftentimes weeds.
Yeah. Most of the poultry manure doesn't bring those diseases in with it. And so, poultry manure is great to use. It's a little hotter than the steer, so you don't need as much. And so, you got to balance that out with something else as well too. The compost from the landfill, great option. Don't do 4 inches. Do 1 inch. Do an inch of manure. Do some leaves. Do some grass clippings with it. Your neighbor's got a wood shop. Get some of his sawdust. Put that out there. 3 or 4 different materials that add up to 2 to 3 to 4 inches. Then we're going to add some humate out there. The humate's full of microbes and microorganisms, a lot of minerals, a lot of micronutrients, and so it's going to build that soil back up. But the microbes that are in there will speed up that decomposition process. And supplementing your soil with the humate every single year will just, the dividends that come from that are amazing, because not only does it break down all that organic matter, but now you've just built your soil back up with micronutrients and minerals that your vegetables are going to pick up. It's going to make them taste better. Yeah. It'll make them taste a lot better next year because of the mineral content that's in your soil.
We saw such a difference in using Humate.
Yeah.
And that was something that we would get a good mixture of a little bit of manure and a lot of leaves and a lot of grass clippings, but we weren't adding the Humate. And when we started adding Humate, because you could always tell in the past, we'd start to go over it with the tiller, and here's all the leaves and the grass clippings,
from
and
the year
nothing
before.
had happened.
Yeah, from the year before.
Yeah.
And so boosting your soil with those beneficial microbes
makes
will
a big difference.
Really make a huge difference. Yeah, and so you'll see a big difference in there. So we get all that organic matter out there, put the Humate on. If you have really heavy clay soils, the best thing you can do along with that organic matter is to add zeolite. Now zeolite comes from Cub River. Yeah, there's a mine right there in Cub River, just over the border in Idaho, and that's where we get our zeolite from. And the zeolite looks like cat litter. The best way to describe it. It looks just like cat litter, but if you look at it under a microscope, it has thousands of little holes in it. It's super porous. And so when you add that to your soil, this is volcanic rock. It never breaks down, but it helps with drainage. It helps your soil so it'll absorb and hold moisture, and it breaks up clay. It breaks up those clay particles better than anything that's out there. And the great thing about it is, since it's rock, it never goes away. It stays out there.
Stays in the
it
garden.
stays there. So you put a whole bunch of peat moss out there, till it into the garden, and in a year, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah.
It just breaks down to the point where it's just this super fine powder. There's nothing left. The zeolite will stick around for years and years and years. And so if you've got bad clay problems, if you have drainage issues, if your soil just won't hold moisture, zeolite is the way to go. I mean, it's amazing how the porous nature of the zeolite allows it to absorb and hold moisture in there. But then when the soil around the zeolite dries out, it releases the moisture back out into the soil. So it's very absorbent, but it also releases the water when the surrounding soil needs it. And so it breaks up clay. It just increases your moisture absorption and retention as well too, without making your soil soggy and wet and muddy. And I mean, if you've got bad clay, you either have mud in the spring or you have bricks in the summer.
Yeah.
And so the zeolite will help condition the soil so it won't be like that anymore. So organic matter, Humate, zeolite, and then straight nitrogen on top of it. If you want an organic form of nitrogen, I'd recommend you do Milorganite, or really good manure, composted manure works great too, but I still like to supplement it with a little bit of higher nitrogen, because those microbes that decompose all that material, they need the nitrogen to break it down. Okay. So straight nitrogen, ammonium sulfate would be great. Urea would be excellent. Ammonium nitrate would be super. Anything that's got high first number fertilizer is perfect. And Milorganite's a great option if you want to go with organic high nitrogen fertilizer. It's got a lot of natural nutrient in there as well too. And then till it all in. Don't leave it on the surface. Till it all in. You want to incorporate that into the soil. Basically what we're doing is we're creating a giant compost pile out there in your garden, and by incorporating it into the soil, it breaks those particles up, mixes it, and then they will decompose a lot faster than they will if they're all compressed together in one spot.
Okay, so few things to prep your garden. Now, if you have like an asparagus garden, and that's something we did several years ago, a raised garden with asparagus, a little different because you don't necessarily want to agitate the roots.
Yeah, you can't till in there. So usually in the fall, we'll just add a really nice, well-composted mulch over the top
just
of those.
On top after you've trimmed everything down.
And then you can kind of rake it into the soil a little bit. Probably the best thing you could do for, like, say, an existing bed of like strawberries or raspberries or asparagus, where you can't get in there and till those all up, would be to use the product that's called Garden Max. The Garden Max is a highly composted finished product, and so it's been composted to the point where it's basically turned almost back into soil, but it has tons of nutrient put into it. It's got the humate, it's got mycorrhiza, it's got kelp meal, it's got all kinds of really great, natural nutritional ingredients in there. And you can put about 3/4 of an inch over your beds. Just lay it on top and just kind of rake it lightly. That way it won't affect your asparagus roots that are down below. It won't affect the canes of your raspberries or your strawberries, but it will put a lot of nutrition, a lot of nutrient back into the soil, put some organic matter in there as well too, and it's amazing what the Garden Max will do for existing flower beds, existing fruit production areas, whether it's raspberries or strawberries or asparagus, without having to till the soil.
To till it up.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about pruning, because as we are heading into the winter months, raspberries, pruning those back,
right.
Fruit trees, some of those others.
I don't like to prune the raspberries too much in the fall. If they're really, really tall, then I'll trim them down to maybe 4 or 5 feet. But otherwise, I'll just kind of let them do their thing. If they're starting to arch over and you think that some added snow on top of them might break them, then that's when you want to go in there and prune. But I wouldn't prune more than, don't prune too much off the top, because we're going to prune them again in the spring and take out all the stuff that got damaged or broken or died back in the wintertime. So if you prune heavy in the fall, you're just going to have to prune heavy again in the spring, and you're going to prune a lot of your raspberries back to the point where they're not going to produce much for you. So I just take enough off the top in the fall that you have to do just to help protect those canes, and then we're going to prune a little bit more aggressively in the springtime, maybe down to 3 or 4 feet. So don't prune too much in the fall, because you just end up pruning again in the springtime. But when it comes to, say, shade trees, maples, birch, it's a great time to prune those in the fall. If you prune maples and birch in the springtime, they bleed like crazy because the sap starts flowing, and you can prune those, and all of a sudden there's like water, sap just pouring out of the trees, all over the place. So you got to be careful with those, pruning them in the springtime. So those are great trees to prune in the fall. Don't prune your flowering trees in the fall too heavily, because you can lose a lot of flowers that way, especially shrubs. Trees not so much, but shrubs for sure. So if it blooms in the springtime before Memorial Day, you don't want to prune it until after it's done blooming. Excuse me. Lilacs, forsythia, definitely don't want to prune those until after they're done blooming. So anything that blooms really early, like those beauty bush, leave those alone until after they're done. But anything that blooms midsummer, we can prune right now. So from between now and early December, you can prune anything that's back. Like midsummer bloomers. So spirea would be great. Mock orange, you can prune those. 9 barks, anything that's blooming in the summer. Cotoneasters, no problems there. But early bloomers, we don't want to prune those until after they're done blooming. And fruit trees, you can prune those in the fall. That works out okay. It's not a problem. But there's some of those shade trees that I really prefer to prune in the fall. If we start getting really cold temperatures and the sap really starts to freeze up in the trees, then the wood's really hard and it's hard to cut. And so your trees get really durable in the wintertime as that sap freezes up. And so even a chainsaw makes it hard to cut, because all that moisture that's in there is frozen, so it's like cutting a rock. And so until about 1st of December, you can still do a lot of pruning, but once it starts getting consistently cold, then it's going to be much harder to prune some of those shade trees and evergreens as well too.
So definitely a lot to do as we're heading into the colder months of fall and winter. Well, it's going to be around the corner. Be here before we know it. We just have 1 minute left, Mark, and we want to mention again everything that's going on at the store this weekend at Anderson Seed and Garden, because all of your fall decor is on sale and cash sale is going on too.
Cash sale's going on, so we're still trying to clear out the remaining shrubs and trees. So 75% off if you pay with cash for remaining evergreens and flowering shrubs, shade trees, flowering trees. great time to get those planted. And then our store's getting decorated for the holidays, so it's looking great right now. Fall decor looks amazing. 15% off on all of our fall decor, and all of our Christmas decor's coming in. We're just making the store look amazing right now.
Okay. And if you pay with cash for your remaining trees and shrubs, 75% off.
Can't beat it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us for the Garden Guide. We'll be back again next week. Still a lot to talk about because next week we probably need to start talking about decorating for Christmas with Christmas lights.
Christmas open house is coming up.
Yeah.
And our crews are out doing Christmas lights right now. So if you want somebody to come do your Christmas lights, give us a call and we'll come give you a bid.
So we'll talk about that coming up next week on the Garden Guide here on KVNU.
Breaking news. Stimulating talk.
Here's what we do. The biggest problem we